What is a strain of human? What is a race of human? A pedigree of human? What is a human? What is a species? Let's stick with the humans and the strains for now. Humans, what is that? That ties into the same answer as what a species is a group of organisms that can reproduce and create viable offspring that can reproduce. This is the general marker of a same species, although it does get a bit grey. These kinds of categories they do move throughout history, and there's sometimes big daisy chains of organisms that can reproduce and produce viable offspring. They can't jump the chain. Anyway, so most people, when they think what a race of human is, they think like there are some Australian Aboriginals, there are some Chinese humans, some British humans, or what. Some people talk Negroes and Caucasians, Mongols, Mongs, or anyway. So we aren't really talking about. Some people do talk about the fact that in Africa alone, sub-Saharan Africa, so it is a fact apparently. And I mean, I don't need to support this because I'm sharing a mainstream narrative, a mainstream point, and that is that you can find more genetic variance, more genetic difference in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa alone, than in the rest of the world. That's to say, we can find humans with genes that are quite different to other humans' genes in the same continent, with the same colour skin. And that amount of difference that we can find on those African humans, that seems to be insinuated that it is larger than what we can find if we can go and find a group of people living in Britain and a group of people living in China and map out the distance between the genetic sequences, how different they are. Or one's living in South America and one's living in Poland or something. We cannot find that there is a bigger difference out in the places external to Africa than there is within Africa itself. So this means that there are all different kinds of races in Africa. There were very likely to be all different kinds of Aboriginal Australian human races on the Australian continent, unless of course they had some amazing system of transport where they see each other year round and the breeding pool's just very homogeneous. Where I'm heading with this is into the domain of what intelligence is, what people are calling intelligence. Because people are like Sam Harris and Charles Murray, they are saying, and these are popular people on the topic of intelligence and all sorts of things, they are saying that if you don't understand that there are differences between races in IQ, then you don't understand. Okay, and the point, they're blowing up about, people were blowing up about this, and then there was just the camps too. Those who believe that, yeah, there is real differences in IQ, those who were agreeing with that, and those who are saying, you're an idiot. That is a very dumb thing to say, or no, there's not. And many people are saying, even if there is, you're an idiot for saying that there is. This is all just common human talk. It seems that, yes, if there are a group of humans that are similar to each other and another group of humans that are similar to each other, and the two groups are different, they are most likely going to have consistent outcome in performance on certain kinds of activity. Subtraction or addition. Maybe one group will be better at addition, and their kids will even be better at addition, and the other group will be better at subtraction. This is just bound to be the case because when two organisms are similar to each other, it means they have similar brains, similar structure of all their cells. This means that the way that they are taught how to do addition is going to be similarly received and similarly affecting. And then when they perform on the test, there's going to be similar results. And perhaps if they are different, then if they are different genetically, then they are very likely to have a different outcome to another group who was taught the same way and tested the same way. That has different genetics. That is to say, they have their body, their form was programmed to develop differently, or it just develops differently. We'll keep it simple. So it seems if we are calling addition intelligence, like the ability to, without pen and paper, to add things up on the fly, on the go, in your head. There's 7 plus 7, 10 plus 21, million plus 2. And it gets more complex, yeah. If we call that intelligence, then we'll say, obviously, some strains of organism are going to be better at addition. They're going to be more intelligent. But the thing is, any strain, whether it's on top or at the very bottom of the performance on a certain test, it might be on top or on the bottom of the same test later on. The way in which the organisms are taught may change. The way in which they live, the way they feel may change. The social climate may change, and this may have drastic changes on their inclination to follow a certain guidance on first how to be tested, and then to follow a certain guidance on actually being tested. So for anyone like Sam Harris to say there are real differences in IQ, it's like he's already assuming that there is this thing called IQ. Like the Saiyans had in Dragon Ball Z, they had a little reader. They can read. there's a thing called an ultimate power level, and we can read it. No one has anything like Dragon Ball Z, but we do have these on paper tests or on the screen, multiple answer sort of questionnaire. And there's there are several kinds that have come in and out of fashion, and even several in fashion at the moment. We have taken a look, some of us, especially people like Sam Harris and Charles Murray. Charles Murray is the author of The Bell Curve. He has taken a very good look at data from the results of certain IQ examinations, comparing the results of certain races of humans that have undertaken the test, and the results of, comparing certain races to other races in the outcome. So we have a pile of data of all the humans who just so happen to take this test and have it reported. And we see that it is much more likely to be below average if the data set is the results of an Aboriginal Australian. So people like Charles Murray and Sam Harris will say, well, it's obvious that, if there's a difference in genetics, there's going to be a difference in how it functions. So if we put a test in front of it, if they're different genetics, it's just obvious. Theoretically, you're going to have a different outcome on that test, especially when you train the organisms in a certain way. And there are seemingly infinite ways to train an organism and to test an organism too. But besides all that, Charles Murray and Samuel Harris and all of them have said that we have these genetic differences, and there's a thing called IQ. It's intelligence, and we can quote it. And there's bound to be the differences in intelligence between races. It's just nature. And we've taken a look at the data, and it looks like the Chinese people maybe on average have the highest intelligence, or the Japanese people, or maybe it's the Ashkenazi Jewish people. This is quite a shocking thing for me, because to me, the sample of data is taken from uncontrolled settings and then put on a loudspeaker uncontrollably by people like Sam Harris, saying, look, there's differences in IQ, which is intelligence, quoting. There's differences between races in intelligence, and we've had a look at what data we do have. This sets up the idea that we've got some kind of robust indication of, and also that we know what intelligence is. We've got robust indication of which races are more intelligent, or at least some kind of indication. The thing is, though, to come and say that you've got an indication when the data that you have, you cannot possibly get any kind of direction from that. It's like looking at a compass that doesn't work at all It's not programmed to see north or anything like that. It's just, and then you flick it around and then you say, well, we've got something. We've got some idea of where north is because this is a compass. And, okay, it's not fixed properly to tell us where north is. But, yeah. And when a great majority of people think you're like one of the smartest people on earth, like Sam Harris is, this can actually be quite alarming, because then we get people like my grandpa who say, I'm not racist. I like Aboriginal people. They're good people. They're not as smart as us though. He says us to include me. Little does he seem to take on board that I'm about 1/5 Aboriginal. But that's par for you. He says, when I went to work with the Aboriginals, they would walk out there for hours and come back with 3 mud crabs, probably 3 blokes, and I would take my crab pot out there and come back after high tide, and I would have about 12 mud crabs. That was all. He said that was the story. That was what I was supposed to gain insight from as to intelligence and races of humans. What might make someone perform better on an IQ test? Well, first of all, if there's an IQ test, there's a human that made it, and there will be another one in the future. And we'll just say that, yeah, what's going to make you perform better on the one that Logan Paul, the most popular podcast talk show thing on the internet, Logan Paul and his crew, they did this BMI online IQ test, and I did the same one. What would make someone do better in this kind of test? I think going to school and putting your mind through that kind of training, day in and day out, consistently, and nutrition, and mainly morale, well-being, how you feel while you're developing all these symbols, when you're developing all this system of communication with the government. You're developing this relationship with society, with what has developed thus far. And if you're a person like me who, like my grandpa knows, I did not come really from an Aboriginal family. I don't recall any of my family members being mistreated. None of them were really severely dominated and forced to take on a new diet, or even unconsciously slipped into a new kind of diet that they never had evolved with, i.e. eat, etc., wheat, etc. What was I saying? I'm basically trying to say that if you're not feeling as happy as other people when you're going to school, you won't develop the same way. If you're not eating as good of food, you won't develop the same way. If you're not as taking to the certain teaching methods, you won't develop the same way. You probably won't. you might take a test and they'll say this is how we know how intelligent you are, and it'll say you're below average intelligence, and it might say that it's because of your genes. It's just who you are, and that there are other kinds of values in life that you surely shine in. It might be because you didn't live that way, you didn't develop that way. Maybe you had all the happiness and all the nutrients and all the school teachers, and you just didn't want a bar of it. And then you do a test that the prestigious institutions are endorsing as a measuring stick of actual intelligence, whatever, and this word intelligence seems to be like basically mind ability. That's a big deal. And then they'll say you're actually not very intelligent. And you might say, well, I saw the test and it looked way different to real life. So to end this race and IQ talk, I want to talk about what it would take to properly gauge different pedigrees of humans in different feats of mind. For example, we want to find out which pedigree of human is the best at subtraction, at least in 2021. We're going to need to go and find some parents. If we want to get robust indications, we'll find parents that are willing to provide the government, let's say us, the government, with these babies. And the parents need to be of the same kind of health, the same feelings, etc., of well-being. They can't be in a kind of cultural depression. You need to get all these human babies and develop them in the same way. If we can afford it, which hypothetically we can, we will have like 7 different locations, trialing 7 different kinds of food, teaching, environment complex, and different kinds of testing methods. For example, we might have mixed races on one island and segregated on the other. We might have certain rules on one island in the playground that aren't in another one. And then we can test them on subtraction, and eventually we can become more elaborate with the testing, more complex, and start throwing in subtraction. Or is that what I already said? And then we can throw in the ability to see camouflage patterns and all sorts of things. And we may even concede that there is seemingly an infinite amount of ways we can teach humans and test them. And no matter how hard we try, we can't force a horse to drink the water either. So, yeah, I think we're all sort of realizing this kind of thing now anyway. If you have all this equipment to run a military, even have a war, fight a war, you want to invest a lot of time and resources into training people to use that equipment. You have a tool that is a piece of paper and has a list of questions and multiple answers that you can use to save yourself a lot of wasted efforts. in taking some people and putting them through a course whereby they are going to take up all this information and absorb it properly as you want them to, take it up as quickly as you want them to, when you want them to, how you want them to, all that. You want those kinds of humans. If there are some humans that are going to get in the way with the one standard that you create to teach people how to run your military, then you don't have enough time to go through carefully inspecting each human to see exactly where they might fit in. You haven't had enough time to go through carefully inspecting your whole military arsenal, your whole machine equipment stash, and all the different ways that it could be used. You have limited time and resource, so you issue all the people to take this test and this paper, and you categorize these people according to how they perform on your test. You might say some are more intelligent. That just means whatever it means. You don't end up teaching a lot of people. And you tell them that they're not smart enough. But the truth is, they are not fitting enough. They are not what you want. And yeah, there's just this grave misconception